Imagine placing a frog into a pot of boiling water. It reacts instantly, panics and leaps out, escaping the danger. But if you place the same frog in a pot of cool water and slowly turn up the heat, it won't notice the change. The temperature rises degree by degree. The frog adjusts, adapts, and before it realizes what's happening, it's too late. Whether or not the biology of this story is true isn't really the point. The metaphor is applicable pretty much everywhere, even in gaming. One small change here and there, and we won't notice the temperature rising. Some may even argue the changes are harmless. However, if you change a bunch of stuff for the worse in a single update, the realization will hit you like a brick wall. Hey, so you know this neat video essayist trick where they open the video on a slightly relevant anecdote? Idola, a Phantasy Star Saga, is a gacha game for iOS and Android, released to commemorate the franchise's 30th anniversary. It was conceived via an internal competition held at SEGA in order to decide how to celebrate the occasion. Idola was one of 50 different entries. It was submitted by Chen Zhizeng, who prior to working on Idola, was the director for PSO 2ES, and Shuntaro Tanaka, who was PSO 2ES's producer. After the project was greenlit, Matsura Masaru, who was PSO 2's lead artist, joined the team as art director. The goal was to expand the Phantasy Star series and adopt a stress-free to play policy, which PSO 2 is known for, and PSO 2ES arguably lacks. The teaser website originally launched on July 20th, 2018, with a masked individual and the promise of a new project for the franchise's 30th anniversary. Back then, I remember a lot of people speculating, this may be Phantasy Star 5. After all, Japan doesn't shy away from making gacha sequels to beloved classic franchises. Luckily, the game wasn't a sequel to the classic Phantasy Star games. It was an independent spin-off. The gameplay heavily resembled Fate Grand Order, and the world-building implied to take place within the PSO 2 universe. Despite not being a mainline Phantasy Star game, it still borrowed a lot of elements from it. At surface level, it may appear as a generic fantasy game, but the more you play, the more sci-fi elements are revealed to you. Idola had an official VTuber promoting the game called Popona. She would act as the mascot for the game, showcasing new characters, as well as explaining some game mechanics. She's very charming, and her energy was very infectious. The game came out in the middle of the VTuber boom, so at the time, it made a lot of sense for SEGA to dip their feet into the VTuber market. The unique gimmick about Idola was the Fate Divergence system. Basically, each character could evolve into a Law or Chaos version. One of these would be a canon evolution, marked as History, and the other would be a what-if scenario, marked as Legend. Each divergence would have different abilities, and unique 2D design, as well as a unique elemental blast animation. Playing Idola benefited you on the Japanese version of PSO 2, and unlike PSO 2 ES, you could play Idola while logged into PSO 2. You would accumulate Idola points, which were exchangeable for various things like accessories, star gems, and the Idola steak, which was one of, if not the best, food buffs you could get, and highly coveted by speedrunners. This made Idola very appealing for me to play. Being unable to play PSO 2 ES while being logged into PSO 2 was a serious deal-breaker for me. You're telling me I can't AFK in the lobby and speak to my oomfies when playing PSO 2 ES? Lame. Idola had a pretty successful launch. In just over a month, the game accumulated 2 million downloads, and less than 3 weeks later that number increased to 3 million. On launch, the game featured 5 story chapters to play through. The characters were beautifully animated using the Dragon Bone animation technique. and the soundtrack was a joy to listen to. The game kept growing and achieving new milestones throughout 2019, even securing an Attack on Titan collaboration, which at the time was really huge. One of the best things about Idola was that it really felt like a fair gacha game. There were plenty of ways to gain playable characters, and free-to-play accessible ones typically didn't lag too far behind the paid ones. The PvP arena featured a standard asynchronous system where you play against the teams of other players, but the way points were distributed means that you had to be strategic about how you defeat your opponents. For example, if you defeated your opponent without letting all of your units attack first, you'd generate less points. This was referred to as an overkill in the community, and even the playing field between free-to-play players and whales. Another unique aspect of Idola was the Idola system. You could select up to 8 characters to generate an Idola with and throw hands in epic kaiju battles. All in all, while the game certainly was a moboj, I think the devs definitely succeeded in making a fair, free-to-play game like they set out to do. The game promised a new story chapter in almost every update, and throughout 2019 they kept that promise. All the effort put into systems like Destiny Divergence, Idola battles, story, and PvP shined through, and being able to play it without having to log out from PSO2 was a cherry on top. That said, a lot of Idola players weren't even PSO2 players to begin with, according to an interview in 2019. But all of that changed in 2020. It's truly tragic how much this franchise relied on 2020 not sucking. But unfortunately, 2020 was just guzzling on that succulent Episode 2 of Idola. Was originally supposed to come out in April 2020, but was delayed by a month due to the ongoing pandemic. The devs also planned to release an art gallery app, but it was cancelled due to difficulties developing the app during the pandemic. Episode 2 finally came out in May, and it was a critical disaster. Where do we start? Well, here, let's see if you notice something.
もう迷いはない。みんなの思いをこの一撃に込める。やー！エンド・オブ・プレイズ。これこそ天に輝く導きの星。うなれ剣よ。一気に蹴り込む。エンド・オブ・プレイズ。これでどうだ！
Yeah, so Episode 2 characters wouldn't have a unique elemental blast animation, depending on their destiny divergence. Additionally, all Episode 2 characters would be 3D models instead of 2D drawings, animated with dragon bones. These characters wouldn't even look different in battle, a very blatant cost-cutting measure. But that's not all. Episode 2 launched with a single story chapter, and additional ones came out every other update. This, along with other changes, meant that obtaining star diamonds through gameplay became really difficult. It effectively doubled the cost it took to get a new 5-star character, made only worse by the Destiny bonus system implemented a couple of months earlier, which required you to get both Destiny divergences of a character to receive maximum stats. You couldn't even ignore these new characters because they were insanely broken. A vast majority of characters that were obtainable throughout Episode 1 were power crept so badly that they became virtually unplayable, both for PvP and PvE. And that's another thing. The new quests that were coming out were really difficult. I remember quitting this game because it just became difficult to keep up as a free-to-play player. Needless to say, the water was boiling, and the frog jumped out. Backlash for the Episode 2 update was massive, and the players were leaving in droves. In July, the devs promised they were going to work on improving the game, but the patches following that livestream didn't reflect that. We did receive brigade battles, which were battles you could take on with your guild members. Those were pretty cool, but the game was still bleeding players. Amid all of this chaos, The global version of Idola was announced, and the publisher was Bulltrend Games. Top gaming company with amazing portfolio of games. Download now. Okay, let's click on the page not found. Don't worry, I'm kidding. They still have one game. A match 3 puzzler. Hey, I mean it could be worse. They didn't announce a game localization, only for it to die a month later yet. But oh well, while the JP version of Idola is on fire, let's actually talk about the global version. This version did not connect to PSO2 Global. Okay, pack it up. We're leaving. Jokes aside, this version of the game wasn't handled very well. Quests would be released out of order. You'd obtain materials you couldn't exchange for anything yet, and the translation was horrific. Some skills had straight-up wrong descriptions. Yeah, let's not beat around the bush. It was a cash grab. Hopefully 2021 will be better for Idola. On the first live stream of the year, SEGA announced that Idola would be switching developers. Oh no! The devs were very transparent that the reason for the switch was that they just couldn't restore the game's quality themselves. This, along with the switch happening at the end of the Japanese fiscal year, tells me that SEGA probably significantly reduced the development staff back in April 2020. Keep in mind, Japanese fiscal years begin on April 1st and end on March 31st. If you ever wondered why so many Japanese companies announce stuff on April 1st, you know the day usually spent bullshitting people. Now you have your answer. Apsy, the new developer, promised a lot of improvements, like buffing Episode 1 characters and distributing one story chapter every update. On March 1st, SEGA would hold a survey with a chance of winning more Star Diamonds, and then Apsy got to work. April 10th, Chapter 5, Character Birthdays, Gacha, where you can select which character you want to pull. May 21st, Chapter 6, Stella, Rosalinda and Jasper buffs. July 2nd, Chapter 7, Anna Marie, Gustav and Mint buffs. August 13th, Chapter 8, Stella, New Year, Rosalind Christmas and Karen Halloween buffed. September 24th, Chapter 9, Auto Story Playback, Fate Divergence, Spoiler Function, Popona, Jane and Gerda Christmas buffs. This is looking good. If they keep up the momentum, surely they would regain. Never mind! SEGA pulled the plug on October 31st. Ouch! This hurt. People were so upset by this announcement. The people who were writing for the Idola Bumped blog couldn't even bring themselves to document the game's shutdown. And I mean, could you blame them? The game's shutdown was explained with the devs being unable to maintain the game's quality. I think it's pretty obvious what happened here. SEGA executives got greedy, reduced the budget. The developers couldn't maintain the output the game had during Episode 1, and when the new devs couldn't save the sinking ship, SEGA pulled the plug completely. It was either continue Idola on a smaller budget, which just brings us back to square one, or pull the plug. All of this could have been avoided if only SEGA let the game be, but instead we had Final Update and 3-year anniversary in the same patch notes. Good job, SEGA! Really, fantastic job. In December, all story cutscenes from Episode 1 would be released to the Idola YouTube channel. In January, on the day the servers shut down, Episode 2 story would follow. At the very least, the story content was preserved. Popona would become the NGS VTuber in 2022, and in 2023, she'd become a VTuber for SEGA in general. She was decently successful, but eventually she decided to graduate. Her final stream was called Pinto the Phantasy, Into the Phantasy, on March 31st. Here, she'd say farewell to all her fans and plug some merch. Phantasy Star Crew prepared a small, touching cutscene using Idola assets in which Idola characters sent her off.
スタート。
すげえこれ何素材あるのこれ
押さえて食べたけど。すごい。懐かしい BGM。こっち。しております。よかった、幸せなんかな今、パーターの2人で。眠い。チャッカポッコ、チャッカポッコ。嘘来る？来ないポポナがやっちゃった。ポポナがチャカポコしちゃった。もう大事な話をしてくれるって。ステラこっちよ。来た！ステラさん！あ、ユリーに。え？
The digital art gallery saw a less positive ending. In 2022, it was indefinitely delayed, and in 2024, SEGA couldn't reach an agreement on its distribution with the publisher, so it was cancelled entirely. The global version of Idola would continue for as long as the game had Japanese content to pull from, and in March 2022, Boltrend Games published a Japanese version of the opening song, sung by Mika Kobayashi. However, by August, this version shut down as well. In the end, the only thing remaining of Idola was this washing machine, where you get to do laundry with your beloved waifus. It's a real shame Idola had to end like this. It was pretty clear that Idola was supposed to run alongside NGS, and I wouldn't even be surprised if it was supposed to replace PSO2ES at some point. When SEGA switched the developers for Idola, the staff returned to PSO2ES, but the game hasn't seen any new story content since. It still receives new chips, and the game cycles seasonal content in and out. Just a few years ago, the game was updated with support for NGS, with features like early urgent quest announcements if you have the premium set. But there are no plans for PSO2ES to come to the West, and with no story content in years, it feels like the game is in maintenance mode. Meanwhile, Idola had very strong ties to PSO2 lore and frequently featured characters from it. Not just for silly cameos, they were even featured in the main story. The game took place very close to when NGS takes place, so the game was just oozing with potential for collaborations between these two games. There were also plans to bring in characters from other Phantasy Star games, like Red Ring Rico from PSO1. All in all, a lot of wasted potential. But from a financial standpoint, I can kind of see why Idola may had issues. Developing a new character for Idola required 3 times the amount of effort it took for other 2D gacha games. It also didn't help that the vast majority of the player base skipped elemental blast animations, so developing 3 unique ones per character felt like wasted resources. It also didn't help that in 2020, Genshin Impact released and forever changed the gacha landscape. Suddenly, being a 2D gacha game collecting JPEGs of waifus wasn't hip anymore. Maybe in the future we will receive an offline version of Idola, similarly to how Octopath Traveler 0 and Mega Man X Dive received offline versions. After all, Idola was a passion project for the Phantasy Star crew, and to this day still receives collaborations with NGS in the form of Line Strike cards and scratch tickets. In the case of Line Strike, they originally planned Idola cards to release much sooner, but ended up delaying it since they feared Idola cards would introduce too many new game mechanics and overwhelm players. The Destiny Divergence abilities are a direct reference to the main gimmick from the game, and the foil variants actually depict each character's beach outfit, so a lot of care was put into these cards. But for now, unfortunately, there is no happy ending to this fantasy. Corporate greed sucks.